My entire world crumbled with 5 words. We're going in a new direction. I'm David Miller, and for 22 years, I poured my soul into SwiftRoute Logistics. At 55, I thought I was indispensable, the architect of their success. My morning coffee, a ritual for 2 decades at my polished mahogany desk, suddenly tasted like ash. This wasn't just a job, it was my legacy. I'd transformed SwiftRoute from a regional player into a national powerhouse, navigating recessions, optimizing routes, and building a network of loyal clients and dedicated drivers. I even once mortgaged my house to cover payroll during a lean quarter. I believed that counted for something. The new direction, I soon learned, was Brett Sterling, a fresh-faced 30-year-old, the CEO's nephew, brimming with innovative ideas from his social media marketing background and utterly devoid of logistics experience. The whispers had been growing for months, hushed conversations in the executive lounge, golf course deals, and family dinners where my years of expertise were silently, systematically undermined. I sat through the forced pleasantries, the hollow "thanks for your service," my mind already adrift. In my jacket pocket, a single business card, tucked away for weeks, suddenly felt like a lifeline, a silent promise of a different future. The following morning, I arrived at the office before the sunrise, the familiar skyline of Atlanta slowly awakening outside my window. This very office, my sanctuary since 23, had witnessed countless victories. I remembered landing the Atlas Industries contract, a $150 million deal that everyone said was out of our league. I'd spent months on the road, building rapport with their procurement team, understanding their intricate supply chain, and designing a new routing system that slashed their costs by 20%. When we secured that deal, the former CEO, Mr. Henderson, had personally called me to his office. "David, you just secured the future of this company," he'd said, a genuine warmth in his voice. That was a long time ago, before the new guard, before the family connections started to overshadow genuine merit. Over the years, I'd forged unbreakable bonds, with drivers who trusted my decisions, clients who relied on our unwavering punctuality, and vendors who knew my word was as good as any signed agreement. I'd missed countless family dinners, worked through holidays, and put out fires that would have crippled lesser operations. But things had undeniably shifted. Brett, the new heir apparent, started showing up at client meetings, tapping away on his tablet, interjecting with marketing buzzwords that left our seasoned clients bewildered. I saw the polite confusion in their eyes, the unspoken question, "Why is this kid here?" The warning signs had been flashing for months. My input was increasingly sidelined in strategic discussions. Budget allocations that once required my explicit approval were now handled by the finance department, often without my knowledge. When I voiced concerns about a proposed route alteration that would directly impact our largest client, I was told my perspective was valuable, but perhaps a bit traditional. 3 months ago, the fog of uncertainty finally lifted. I was reviewing our quarterly performance reports when Marie Gavin from Atlas Industries called my direct line. Marie had been my primary contact for 9 years, a true professional ally and a friend. "David, I need to ask you something completely off the record," she began, her voice unusually guarded. "Are there significant changes coming at SwiftRoute? Some of our executives are hearing rumors about new leadership in operations." I chose my words carefully. "Nothing official yet, Marie, but there might be some transitions in the works." "I see," she said quietly. Then she gave me her personal business card. "If anything changes, please call me. The relationship we've built is too important to lose." I'd thanked her and slipped the card into my wallet, not fully grasping its significance then. Now, sitting in my office, packing away 2 decades of my life into a cardboard box, I understood. It wasn't just a business card. It was a lifeline. The farewell gathering felt like a funeral. Scheduled for 4 p.m. in the very conference room where my career had been unceremoniously ended, it was a hollow gesture. I spent the morning patiently, painstakingly, training Brett on our major accounts. He nodded along, his eyes glazed over, clearly not comprehending the intricate web of logistics. So, basically, we just move stuff from point A to point B, right? He'd chirped during our session on the Atlas Industries contract. How hard can it be? I didn't bother to correct him. I just handed him the client folder and suggested he review the delivery specifications carefully. At 3:30 p.m., I gathered my remaining personal items. The company had ordered a sheet cake emblazoned with "Thank you, David" in cheerful blue frosting. There were maybe 20 people there, mostly drivers and warehouse staff, the true backbone of SwiftRoute, the people I had worked alongside for years. The board members, predictably, had other commitments. The CEO, Mr. Sullivan, delivered a brief, rehearsed speech about my contributions and dedication, wishing me well in my future endeavors. It was a performance. When he finished, Brett stepped forward, a smug grin plastered across his face. "I just want to say," he began, "that David has done great work here, but business evolved. We need new energy, new ideas. Your time is over, old man. But don't worry, I'll take good care of everything you built." The room went silent. A few drivers shifted uncomfortably. Our lead warehouse supervisor looked away, his face etched with something akin to shame. I felt a profound stillness settle over me, a quiet calm. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I simply stood, shook hands with the people who mattered, and walked out, my cardboard box clutched tightly to my chest. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck, the engine off, as the setting sun cast long, melancholic shadows across the asphalt. 18 years. Early mornings, late nights, missed milestones. The clients who trusted me, the employees who depended on me, and Brett's condescending smirk, his casual dismissal of everything I had built. Then I pulled out my phone and found Marie Gavin's business card. She answered on the second ring. "Marie, they made their move," I said, my voice steady. "I heard." "Brett Sterling, right, the nephew with the marketing background." "That's him." There was a pause. Then Marie said, "David, I think it's time we had a conversation. Are you free for dinner tomorrow?" I started my truck, pulling out of the SwiftRoute parking lot for the very last time as an employee. "I'll be there," I said. As I drove home, a feeling I hadn't experienced in months began to stir within me. Not anger, not bitterness, but a fierce, exhilarating clarity. The game, I realized, was far from over. It had just begun. Saturday evening, I met Marie at a quiet Italian restaurant in a charming historic district of Atlanta. She had chosen a secluded corner booth, and I understood why when she opened her elegant leather briefcase and spread several documents across the table. "Before we talk business, David, I want you to know how truly sorry I am about what happened," she began, her gaze earnest. 22 years of partnership, and they replace you with someone who asked me last week if we needed our industrial solvents delivered in insulated containers. I almost cracked a smile. "He asked you about insulated containers for industrial solvents. Apparently, he confused us with a gourmet ice cream distributor." Marie shook her head, a hint of exasperation in her voice. "David, I've been in procurement for 17 years. I've never worked with anyone more reliable than you. When you say a delivery will arrive at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, it arrives at 2 p.m. on Tuesday." She pulled out a contract summary. "This is our current agreement with SwiftRoute Logistics. $150 million over 4 years, renewable. It represents about 45% of their total revenue." I knew those numbers by heart. "Here's what Brett doesn't understand," she continued, leaning forward slightly. "This contract exists because of relationships, not just competitive pricing. When we had that critical equipment breakdown in 2019 and needed emergency parts deliveries, you personally drove out to our facility at midnight to coordinate the response. When our usual vendor failed us during the unexpected freeze last year, you found an alternative supplier in 6 hours. I remembered both situations clearly. That's the job, Marie." "No, David, that is not the job." that is going above and beyond, repeatedly, for years. And now they expect me to maintain that same level of service with someone who thinks logistics is just moving stuff from point A to point B. Marie's expression became more serious. I've been authorized by Atlas Industries to explore alternative logistics partnerships. Our contract with SwiftRoute expires in 60 days. If we choose not to renew, they lose their biggest client. I set my coffee cup down carefully, my mind racing. What are you suggesting? Apex Global Logistics approached us 8 months ago, she explained. They're expanding their domestic freight division and looking for experienced leadership. They offered me a very competitive proposal, but I told them we were happy with our current provider. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. That was when our current provider included you. I understood now why she had wanted this conversation off the record. And if I were to join Apex Global, then we would have a reason to reconsider their proposal. Over the next hour, Marie laid out the details. Apex Global Logistics was a rapidly growing Charlotte-based company with strong financials and aggressive expansion plans. They needed someone with established client relationships and proven operational expertise to lead their new domestic freight division. The position would be Executive Vice President of Operations, with significant equity participation. The offer is substantial, she said, sliding a document across the table. But more importantly, it's a chance to build something new, without the politics and family connections that derailed your career at SwiftRoute. I reviewed the terms quickly. The base salary was competitive, but the equity package was extraordinary. If Apex Global achieved their projected growth targets, my stake would be worth more than I had made in my last 5 years combined at SwiftRoute. There's one condition, Marie added. Apex Global needs an answer within 2 weeks. They want to announce the new division leadership before the end of the month. I looked up from the documents. 2 weeks isn't much time. It's enough time for SwiftRoute to realize what they're losing, she said, a determined glint in her eye. I plan to inform them next Friday that we will not be renewing our contract. I'll also mention that we are exploring partnerships with companies that have more experienced leadership. We finished dinner discussing market conditions and logistical challenges, but my mind was already working through the implications. Brett would have to handle the Atlas Industries relationship for exactly 9 days before learning they were taking their business elsewhere. He would have no idea how to respond. No relationships to leverage, no understanding of what had gone wrong. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my termination. Anticipation. Not for revenge, exactly, but for the opportunity to prove that experience and relationships still mattered in business. I had 48 hours to make my decision, but honestly, I had already decided the moment Brett called me an old man whose time was over. Monday morning, I called Apex Global Logistics and arranged a meeting with their executive team. The company headquarters was located in a sleek, modern office complex near the Charlotte airport, and as I walked through their expansive lobby, I could see why Marie had been impressed with their proposal. The CEO, Dr. Vivian Dudley, was a former aerospace logistics executive who understood the complexities of large-scale supply chain management inside and out. She had founded Apex Global 5 years earlier with backing from prominent venture capital investors, and they had grown rapidly by focusing on specialized, high-value freight. David, your reputation precedes you, Dr. Dudley said as we settled into her spacious office. I've heard nothing but positive feedback about your work at SwiftRoute. The Atlas Industries relationship alone is worth more than most companies generate in total revenue. I appreciated her directness. Marie Gavin suggested you might be interested in expanding into domestic freight. More than interested, David. We have been planning this expansion for 2 years, but we needed the right person to lead it. Someone with established relationships and proven results. She leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. What Marie may not have mentioned is that we have been watching SwiftRoute's performance closely. Their client retention has declined significantly over the past year. This was news to me. I wasn't aware of any major client losses. 3 accounts terminated their contracts in the last 6 months, all citing concerns about service reliability and communication issues, Dr. Dudley revealed. The board has been scrambling to maintain revenue, which is probably why they made the changes they did. She pulled out a folder. We did some research after Marie contacted us. SwiftRoute's financial position is not as stable as it appears. They have been using short-term credit lines to cover operational costs, and their debt-to-equity ratio has increased substantially. I studied the documents she provided. The financial analysis showed a company under pressure, making desperate moves to cut costs and attract new investment. Replacing experienced leadership with family connections was starting to make sense from their perspective, even if it was strategically short-sighted. How did you obtain this information? I asked. Public filings, mostly, plus industry contacts who have been watching their performance. Dr. Dudley smiled faintly. The logistics business is smaller than people think, David. Word travels fast when a company starts struggling. She explained that Apex Global had been positioning themselves to acquire distressed competitors, but the opportunity to hire experienced leadership and attract their client base was even more appealing. If I joined their team and brought the Atlas Industries contract with me, it would accelerate their growth plans by years. There's something else you should know, Dr. Dudley continued. We have been in preliminary discussions with 2 other former SwiftRoute clients. They are both expressing interest in switching providers, but they want assurance that they would be working with experienced logistics professionals. I recognized the names she mentioned, Canyon Chemical and Southern Energy Solutions. Both were accounts I had managed personally, relationships built over years of reliable service and problem solving. If those clients followed Atlas Industries to Apex Global, SwiftRoute would lose nearly 70% of their revenue within a matter of months. What would be my role in client transitions? I asked, my voice steady, my heart beginning to quicken. You would lead the entire domestic freight division, full operational authority, equity participation, and complete independence to build the team you need. Dr. Dudley paused, her gaze unwavering. The only requirement is that you maintain the service standards that made you successful at SwiftRoute. As I drove back home, I understood that this was about more than just my career transition. SwiftRoute had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had assumed their client relationships were tied to the company rather than the individual who had built and maintained those relationships. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Tuesday morning, I signed the contract with Apex Global Logistics. Dr. Dudley handled the paperwork personally, and we agreed that my official start date would be the following Monday. That gave us exactly 1 week to coordinate the client transitions and prepare for what was coming. My first call was to Marie Gavin. It's done, I said simply. Excellent, she replied, her voice tinged with satisfaction. I'll be meeting with Brett Sterling on Friday to discuss the contract renewal. Should be an interesting conversation. What will you tell him? The truth, that Atlas Industries has decided to explore alternative logistics partnerships, and we will not be renewing our agreement with SwiftRoute when it expires next month. I could picture Brett's reaction. He would probably try to schedule an emergency meeting with Mr. Sullivan, scrambling to understand what had gone wrong. But by then, it would be too late to salvage the relationship. Marie, I want you to know I appreciate the risk you're taking. David, this isn't a risk. This is a business decision based on 22 years of exceptional service. Atlas Industries needs reliable logistics partners, and you represent reliability. Wednesday and Thursday, I worked quietly from home, developing transition plans and reviewing client files. Dr. Dudley had provided me with detailed information about Apex Global's capabilities, and I was impressed with their infrastructure and technological systems. In many ways, they were better positioned than SwiftRoute to handle complex logistics requirements. Thursday evening, my phone rang. The caller identification showed SwiftRoute Logistics main number. Walter, this is James from the CO's office. Mr. Sullivan would like to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow morning. Would 9 a.m. work? I almost laughed. What does he want to discuss? He didn't provide details, but he mentioned it was regarding client relationships and transition planning. Tell Mr. Sullivan I am no longer available for transition planning. My employment with SwiftRoute ended last Friday. Sir, I think there may be some misunderstanding. This would be a paid consultation. There is no misunderstanding. James, have a good evening. Friday morning, while I was reviewing contracts at Apex Global's offices, Dr. Dudley knocked on my door. You might want to see this, she said, handing me her phone. It was a news alert from the Atlanta Business Chronicle. SwiftRoute Logistics loses major client. Stock drops 15%. The article was brief but accurate. Atlas Industries had announced they were terminating their logistics contract with SwiftRoute, citing strategic realignment with a new service provider. The stock market had responded immediately, driving share prices down in heavy trading. How did the media find out so quickly? I asked. Atlas Industries is publicly traded. They had to file a disclosure about the contract termination. Dr. Dudley smiled faintly. The business community is very interested in their choice of new logistics provider. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. David, this is Brett Sterling. We need to talk immediately. Call me. I showed the message to Dr. Dudley. What do you think? I think Brett Sterling is having a very bad day, she said, and a knowing glint entered her eyes. And it's about to get worse. That afternoon, I received 2 more calls from former SwiftRoute clients, Canyon Chemical and Southern Energy Solutions, both asking about my availability for consulting work. By evening, it was clear that word had spread throughout the Atlanta logistics community. The experienced professional was available, and companies were interested. I did not call Brett Sterling back. I did not contact SwiftRoute's executive team. I did not gloat or make public statements about my transition. I just answered the phone when it rang and scheduled meetings with prospective clients. The market would handle the rest. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my new office at Apex Global when Dr. Dudley knocked on my door, a newspaper folded under her arm. You're going to want to read this, she said, placing the Atlanta Business Chronicle on my desk. The headline read, SwiftRoute Logistics seeks emergency funding after client exodus. The article detailed everything that had unfolded since my departure. Atlas Industries had been the first to leave, followed within days by Canyon Chemical and Southern Energy Solutions. Both companies had announced partnerships with Apex Global, specifically citing the experience and reliability of our logistics team. Within 2 weeks, SwiftRoute had lost nearly 70% of their major contracts. The board had called an emergency meeting. Brett Sterling had resigned, citing personal reasons and family obligations. The CEO, Mr. Sullivan, had been forced to accept a bridge loan from private investors just to maintain operations. There's more, Dr. Dudley said, pointing to a smaller article on the facing page. Brett Sterling has joined his father-in-law's real estate development company. Apparently, logistics wasn't the right fit for his skill set. I folded the newspaper and set it aside. What about their remaining operations? They're trying to rebuild with a smaller client base. The new operations manager is actually someone you trained, Michael Reed. He reached out yesterday to ask if we might consider some kind of partnership arrangement. I remembered Michael. Good worker, solid understanding of the business, but he had inherited an impossible situation. What did you tell him? That we would be happy to discuss subcontracting opportunities if they could meet our service standards. It was a professional response. Apex Global was growing rapidly, and we needed reliable partners to handle overflow capacity. If SwiftRoute could rebuild their operations and maintain quality standards, there might be room for collaboration. But that would be a business decision, not a personal one. 6 months later, I was driving through downtown Atlanta when I passed the building that had housed SwiftRoute Logistics headquarters. A for lease sign hung prominently in the front window. They had relocated to a smaller facility on the south side of town, focusing on local delivery services and subcontracting work. Michael Reed was doing his best to rebuild the company's reputation, but the damage had been substantial. Most of their former clients had moved on to other providers. I pulled into a coffee shop and sat by the window, watching the early morning traffic. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter, Jessica. Dad, saw the article in Forbes about Apex Global. Congratulations on the expansion. The Forbes piece had highlighted our company's rapid growth and successful entry into the domestic freight market. We had tripled our client base and expanded operations to 3 additional states. The equity stake that had seemed optimistic 18 months earlier was now worth more than I had earned in 20 years at SwiftRoute. But the real satisfaction wasn't financial. It was walking into our warehouse every morning and seeing drivers who trusted my leadership, working with clients who valued long-term relationships, and building something sustainable rather than just profitable. I finished my coffee and drove to the office. Dr. Dudley was already there, reviewing proposals for our next expansion phase. We had been approached by companies in Dallas and Miami, and the demand for experienced logistics management was higher than ever. "Good morning, David," she said as I walked into the conference room. "Ready to change another industry." I sat down and opened my laptop. Outside the window, Atlanta was waking up to another day of opportunity and possibility. "Let's get to work," I said. The phone rang, and I answered it, just like always.